When two beings meet through the body, what truly occurs goes far beyond what the senses perceive. The body is only the visible gate, the entryway to something unseen yet deeply felt. When a man enters a woman, it is not merely a joining of flesh, but a conversation of energies, a dialogue that cannot be spoken in words. The surface of the encounter may seem physical, but beneath it lies an entire universe of emotion, intention, memory, and consciousness. The body becomes the instrument through which energy travels, and that energy carries the imprint of everything each person has lived, feared, and learned to love. In that moment of closeness, he is not only touching her skin, he is touching her history, her vulnerability, and her essence. Every breath, every heartbeat, every small hesitation carries a message that goes deeper than thought. If his mind is restless, if his heart is unsteady, she will feel that disturbance like a ripple in still water. The union becomes a mirror of inner balance. What the man brings into this sacred space is not only desire, but the sum of his consciousness. The purity of his presence determines the depth of connection. Union beyond flesh begins when awareness replaces instinct. When the act is stripped of rush and goal, what remains is presence. Presence is the most intimate form of connection, for in presence there is no division between giver and receiver. There is only flow. The man who enters without presence remains outside, no matter how close his body comes. The man who enters with awareness, however, finds himself within. Not only within her body, but within her energy, her silence, her truth. This kind of union requires stillness inside the masculine heart. It asks for him to slow down, to listen not only with his hands, but with his entire being. When he breathes deeply and feels without reaching, he begins to sense the subtle language of energy. He notices how her breath changes when she feels safe, how her muscles soften when she feels seen, how her pulse synchronizes with his when both surrender their defenses. The union then becomes meditation in motion, an unfolding of spirit through the rhythm of breath and awareness. Flesh may bring pleasure, but only presence brings depth. To be physically close is easy, to be energetically aligned is rare. Most enter seeking pleasure, but few seek to understand what that closeness reveals about themselves. True union exposes everything that lies hidden: insecurities, pride, fear of rejection, need for control. These inner movements become visible in the way one touches, the way one holds, the way one lets go. In the mirror of another's body, the man meets his own truth. When he learns to see her not as an object of satisfaction but as a sacred mirror, the energy begins to transform. Desire becomes devotion. Movement becomes mindfulness. The moment expands beyond sensation, reaching into the space where consciousness awakens. In this state, touch is no longer about taking or giving. It becomes a circulation of life force, an exchange that purifies and elevates both. The body can deceive the untrained mind, but energy never lies. If he approaches with hunger, the space becomes heavy. If he approaches with awareness, it becomes luminous. The woman's body feels the difference instinctively, responding not to words or gestures, but to the vibration of his intention. The deeper he listens, the more he feels that this act is not about conquering, but merging, not about possessing, but dissolving. In that dissolution, something ancient awakens, a remembrance that life itself is created through union and that creation is sacred. When a man truly enters beyond the flesh, he stops seeking to prove his worth. He no longer measures himself by performance or outcome. He moves as consciousness moves, slow, deliberate, attentive. He realizes that what he gives is not physical but energetic: his calmness, his reverence, his stillness. She receives him not only through her body but through her energy field, through the subtle language of trust that exists before any word is spoken. The more he honors that space, the more the experience transforms from passion into peace. To enter another being is to enter the universe itself. Every breath shared in intimacy becomes an act of creation. Each heartbeat is a reminder that the body is only the vessel. The essence lies in the invisible exchange taking place within. When two energies align in truth, the separation between self and other begins to dissolve. What remains is awareness meeting awareness, light meeting light. Union beyond flesh is not about losing oneself in another. It is about discovering oneself through another. It is a sacred mirror in which the masculine meets the feminine, and both remember the wholeness from which they were born. This kind of connection asks for honesty, patience, and emotional clarity. It cannot be rushed, it cannot be faked, and it cannot be maintained by desire alone. It is sustained only by awareness, awareness of self, of other, and of the space between. The man who understands this kind of union carries a different presence. He does not chase, he attracts through stillness. He does not demand, he offers through awareness. His energy becomes grounded, and in that grounding, he gives safety. When he enters with respect, not only for her body, but for the life force that animates her. In that awareness, pleasure and peace merge. It is no longer about physical satisfaction, but about energetic alignment, about returning to the natural flow of giving and receiving that exists in all of nature. Union beyond flesh is the remembrance that intimacy is sacred work. It is the meeting of two worlds that can only harmonize through presence, reverence, and trust. It is where the physical becomes spiritual, where sensation becomes meditation, and where two beings momentarily disappear into the oneness that has always existed beneath the surface of all things. The masculine energy, whether in a man or in any being, carries within it a deep and silent longing. The desire to be received. Beneath the layers of strength, logic, and control lies an unspoken yearning to be welcomed without judgment, to be seen without having to perform, to be felt without needing to prove. The world often teaches the masculine to give, to protect, to conquer, to move forward. But rarely does it teach him how to surrender into the experience of being received, not for what he does, but for what he is. When a man enters a space of intimacy, he carries the weight of this unacknowledged longing. The body acts, but behind the body is an energy that seeks home. It is not only about physical closeness, it is about the internal permission to let go of the masks that have been worn for too long. Every man who has ever loved, every man who has ever tried to express tenderness, carries within him the quiet question, will I be received as I am? To be received means more than to be accepted. It means to be felt, to be allowed entry not only into the body but into the field of another's presence. The masculine, when it meets the feminine, instinctively wants to merge, to dissolve into that which softens him. But that softening can only happen when the energy opposite him opens in trust. A man may enter a woman's body, but what he truly seeks is entry into her openness, her inner stillness, her welcoming energy. He desires to feel her safety because it reminds him of his own forgotten innocence. The masculine energy in its pure form is directed, linear, and focused. It moves outward, it gives, it penetrates, not just in the physical sense, but in the way it acts in the world. Yet when this energy never finds a place to rest, it becomes restless, aggressive, and disconnected. It moves without direction, achieves without meaning, and loves without depth. What calms this energy is not resistance, but reception. When the masculine is received by the feminine, not the gender, but the energy of softness, openness, and intuition, it begins to relax back into harmony. To be received means that his presence is enough. It means he does not have to force, he does not have to prove, he does not have to hide. In that moment, his doing stops and his being begins. The act of being received is not about physical submission, it is about energetic surrender. The man who is received feels his own power differently. It no longer exists to dominate or to achieve, but to protect, to nourish, and to honor. In intimate union, when the woman allows herself to open energetically, she gives him more than her body. She gives him the reflection of acceptance. Her openness says, "You are safe here." That message travels deeper than words, reaching the spaces within him that have been closed since childhood. In her receiving, he experiences a healing that goes beyond the moment. For a brief time, he touches peace, not because he has conquered, but because he has been allowed to rest. This is why, for many men, the physical act can feel so emotionally charged, even when they do not have the language to express it. The act becomes a symbol of being received, a reflection of whether they are welcome in their totality or only for what they can give. When the energy is open and conscious, it becomes sacred. When it is unconscious, it becomes a search for validation. Many men wander from body to body not out of lust alone, but out of the silent hope that somewhere, someone will receive them fully, will make them feel home. The tragedy is that most men are taught to suppress the very vulnerability that would allow them to experience this kind of depth. Society tells them that to seek to be received is weakness, that to want tenderness is soft, that to show emotion is unmanly. So they armor themselves, carrying inside them the hunger to be seen, but the fear of being exposed. And so the longing to be received becomes buried beneath the need to perform, to please, to control. They give endlessly, but they are rarely able to surrender. True reception of the masculine requires presence from the feminine. It requires a kind of stillness that can hold without absorbing, that can feel without reacting. When the feminine energy remains grounded and open, she becomes like the ocean receiving the river. She allows the flow, she does not force direction, she simply receives with depth. This receiving does not make her passive. It makes her powerful, for in her openness she transforms. She takes what is given and turns it into connection, intimacy, and life. When the masculine finally feels received, something inside him begins to melt. The walls of tension that he built to protect himself slowly dissolve. He breathes differently. His movements slow down. The silence between words becomes rich with meaning. In that state, the man is no longer reaching outward to prove his existence, he is returning inward to feel it. To be received is to remember that he is enough without effort. The union between masculine and feminine energies is not about dominance or submission, but about harmony. One moves, the other receives. One gives direction, the other gives depth. When both are conscious, they create balance. When one resists, imbalance arises. The man who seeks to be received is not weak, he is seeking balance. He wants to give and be received in equal measure. He wants to feel that his presence has meaning beyond the surface of the act, that his energy has found resonance in another being. When a man finds a space where he can be received without judgment, his entire energy transforms. He becomes softer yet stronger, quieter yet deeper. He no longer fears vulnerability because it no longer feels like exposure, it feels like connection. He stops trying to control love and begins to embody it. His need to be received becomes his pathway to consciousness, because only when he feels safe to surrender can his awareness expand beyond ego and into the vastness of being itself. Would you like me to continue with Vive, the mirror of energy? Next, in the same 800-word meditative style. Every interaction between two people is a reflection, a silent exchange of vibrations that speaks louder than words. When a man and a woman come together, not just in touch, but in presence, what unfolds is a mirror, a reflection of everything that is carried within. The energy between them does not lie, it cannot pretend. It simply reflects the truth of what each person brings into that moment. In the meeting of bodies, there is a meeting of inner worlds. Every movement, every glance, every breath becomes a translation of unseen energy, a mirror through which both come to face themselves. Energy is the language beneath all languages. Before any word is spoken, the body already knows. It senses tension, openness, hesitation, or surrender. When two energies meet, they do not ask who is right or wrong, they reveal what is real. In that sacred reflection, one begins to see the unhealed parts of the self. The fears, the insecurities, the need for validation, the desire to control, the yearning to be loved. The mirror does not judge, it only shows what exists. The more conscious the person is, the more clearly they can read what the mirror reveals. When a man enters a woman, his energy carries everything he has not yet faced. His past wounds, his doubts, his confidence, his love, his intentions, all travel through the same channel. She feels them, not always in thought, but in sensation. Her body becomes the mirror of his inner state. If his energy is scattered, she feels disconnection. If his presence is grounded, she feels safety. If his intention is pure, she feels trust. In her openness, she reflects him back to himself. Through her, he meets his own energy. Through her responses, he learns what resides within. The mirror of energy is not gentle, it is exact. It reflects both light and shadow. Many fear it because it exposes what the mind tries to hide. A man may believe he is strong, but when faced with true feminine presence, his pretenses dissolve. He cannot hide behind confidence if his energy is restless. He cannot pretend to be loving if his energy seeks only to take. The mirror will reveal the truth. Her energy will not respond to the mask, it will respond to what lies beneath it. This is why conscious intimacy is never about technique, it is about vibration. What one truly is will always be felt no matter how carefully one performs. Likewise, the woman too is mirrored. Her energy shows her where she stands within herself. If she holds fear, the masculine energy will press against it. If she withholds trust, he will feel her barrier and withdraw. If she opens fully, she will see reflected back the depth of her own power. The mirror of energy is mutual. Each person becomes a reflection of the other's consciousness. The meeting becomes not only an act of love, but a teaching, one that reveals where growth is needed. In this space, The body becomes a sacred instrument for awareness. The deeper the awareness, the clearer the reflection. When both partners are unconscious, they remain trapped in reaction. One feels resistance, the other feels rejection. One feels emptiness, the other feels confusion. They begin to blame the other for what they do not understand within themselves. But when awareness enters, everything changes. Instead of reacting, they begin to observe. The mirror becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. Each sensation, each emotional wave, becomes a guide pointing back to the inner state that created it. A man who learns to see through this mirror no longer seeks to fix or control what he experiences. He learns to read the energy, to feel the language beneath the surface. When she pulls away, he no longer takes it as rejection. He senses the boundary that asks for presence. When she softens, he feels the space that invites surrender. He understands that what he sees outside is what he transmits within. Her response is his reflection. She mirrors his vibration, not his words. Through this mirror, he grows from boyhood into consciousness. The mirror of energy operates on subtle levels. It can be felt even without touch. A gaze, a tone, a silence, all carry information about the energetic exchange taking place. When two energies meet in awareness, the reflection becomes luminous. There is no struggle, no need to prove or control, only flow. The masculine energy offers presence, the feminine energy offers receptivity. Together they create balance, a dance where giving and receiving happen effortlessly. But when the energy of one becomes distorted, when fear, ego, or desire take control, the mirror instantly reflects the imbalance. This is not punishment, it is guidance. The mirror only shows what needs to be seen for growth to occur. Every relationship, even the briefest one, functions as a mirror. The more intimate the connection, the clearer the reflection becomes. The closer one comes to another, the less space there is to hide behind illusion. Intimacy magnifies energy. The slightest intention, the smallest shift in emotion, becomes visible. This is why deep connections can feel both healing and uncomfortable. They reveal too much. They show where love flows and where it stops. To be in such a space requires courage. The courage to see oneself without disguise. The mirror of energy does not flatter the ego, it liberates the soul. It teaches that attraction is not random, but magnetic. You attract the energy that matches your state of being. If you are restless, you draw restlessness. If you are peaceful, you draw calm. Every encounter is an opportunity to witness your own frequency reflected back. When a man meets a woman who cannot open to him, he is being shown where he still resists within himself. When she meets a man who cannot stay, she is being shown where she fears to be fully seen. The mirror never lies, it only reveals. In conscious union, both learn to read this mirror with compassion. Instead of blaming each other for what they feel, they recognize that each sensation is information. They use awareness to transform tension into connection. The masculine learns presence, the feminine learns openness. Both energies purify each other through reflection. Through this process, intimacy becomes not an escape, but a practice of awakening. Every touch, every breath becomes a meditation, an invitation to look deeper, to see what is real beneath the surface. The mirror of energy, when understood, becomes a path of transformation. It shows that no one is the source of your emotions. They only awaken what is already within. It teaches that love is not about finding perfection in another, but about discovering awareness in yourself. When one learns to look into this mirror without fear, every connection becomes sacred, every union becomes a lesson, and every reflection becomes a step closer to truth. In a world that constantly measures worth through action, display, and outcome, the concept of presence has become almost forgotten. From early on, many are taught that to be valued, one must do more, achieve more, impress more. This mindset extends even into the most intimate spaces. The idea that love, passion, and connection must be performed, proven, and perfected. But true intimacy has nothing to do with performance, it has everything to do with presence. Performance is driven by the mind, presence is born from awareness. One seeks validation, the other seeks truth. Presence is not something one does, it is something one is. It is the quiet stillness that remains when the noise of expectation falls away. In moments of deep connection, whether physical or emotional, presence is what allows both people to feel seen, felt, and safe. When a man enters intimacy from a place of performance, he becomes lost in his own head, counting, comparing, analyzing, trying to meet imagined standards. But when he enters from presence, everything slows down. The body becomes an instrument of awareness, not of ego. Each breath, each movement, each pause carries meaning because it arises from a place of genuine connection, not from the need to achieve an outcome. To choose presence over performance is to let go of the illusion that you must do something extraordinary to be enough. Presence does not seek to impress, it seeks to connect. It does not demand perfection, it demands attention. When one is fully present, there is no room for judgment or fear. The moment becomes whole in itself. The body and the mind move together, guided not by thought but by awareness. In this state, intimacy becomes sacred, not because of how it looks, but because of how deeply it is felt. Performance exists in the external world. Presence belongs to the inner one. When a man performs, his energy becomes scattered. He worries about technique, perception, or approval. He is divided between doing and being. This division creates tension, and tension disrupts flow. The feminine energy, which is sensitive and receptive, feels this immediately. Even if he moves perfectly, something will feel off, not because of the movement itself, but because the energy behind it lacks authenticity. She can sense when he is not fully there, when his body is close but his awareness is elsewhere. But when presence enters, everything changes. The air thickens with silence, time slows. The masculine energy no longer acts to achieve but to connect. The focus shifts from how to what is. Each touch becomes a listening, each breath becomes a communication. He begins to feel her not as an object of pleasure, but as an expression of life energy flowing between them. The act turns into meditation. Performance disappears and awareness takes its place. What once felt like effort now feels like rhythm, like flow, like harmony. Presence invites depth. It allows energy to move naturally, without force or pretense. It creates a space where both partners can be honest, where vulnerability replaces fear. In presence, there is no competition, no need to prove dominance or skill. There is only a gentle exchange of energy, giving and receiving happening simultaneously. The feminine feels seen because he is truly there. The masculine feels free because he no longer has to perform. Both energies relax, and in that relaxation, something real begins to unfold. In every performance, there is an audience. In presence, there is only awareness. The masculine, conditioned by the world to perform, often forgets that the greatest act of strength is stillness. Stillness does not mean inaction, it means full awareness within action. It means being so completely absorbed in the now that nothing exists outside of it. The body moves, but the movement is guided by intuition, not by expectation. When he learns this, his energy becomes magnetic, grounded, and calm. The feminine can feel it, the absence of anxiety, the presence of peace. In that peace, trust naturally arises. The more present a person becomes, the more they begin to sense the subtle movements of energy, not only within themselves but within the other. They can feel when to move closer and when to pause, when to lead and when to listen, when to hold and when to release. These signals are not taught by any external system. They arise from awareness itself. Presence sharpens perception. It allows both partners to feel the invisible threads of connection weaving between them. In this state, there is no agenda, no script, no goal, only truth expressing itself through touch, breath, and silence. Performance feeds the ego, presence dissolves it. The ego wants to win, to be admired, to be remembered. But the spirit wants to merge, to dissolve into the experience, to become one with what is. Presence is the gateway to that dissolution. It is the point where identity disappears and unity begins. The man who is truly present does not ask, "Am I doing this right?" He asks nothing at all. He listens with his whole being. He allows energy to guide him. His awareness becomes the bridge that connects the seen and the unseen, the physical and the spiritual. When presence takes the place of performance, intimacy transforms into meditation. Both partners begin to feel the sacredness of the moment. The room, the air, even the silence vibrates differently. The body is no longer just flesh, it becomes a vessel for consciousness. Each movement feels alive because it carries awareness within it. There is no rush, no pressure, no pretending, only feeling, breathing, being. Presence creates safety. Performance creates pressure. When a woman feels presence, she opens naturally. She softens because she senses that she does not have to protect herself. She feels held not by hands alone, but by consciousness. Her body responds because energy feels trust before the mind understands it. In the same way, the man feels liberated. He no longer chases validation. He moves with intention, not insecurity. In this shared field of awareness, both dissolve the boundaries between self and other. To live and love from presence is to honor the sacredness of connection. It means valuing depth over display, authenticity over approval, stillness over show. It asks for courage, the courage to be vulnerable, to slow down, to feel deeply without trying to control the outcome. Presence does not seek to prove anything. It seeks to experience everything as it is. It transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary, because when awareness fills a moment, that moment becomes infinite. Performance may impress the world, but only presence touches the soul. It is not about how much one gives, but how fully one is there while giving. It is not about what one does, but about the consciousness that guides the doing. Presence turns the simplest gesture into something sacred, the smallest breath into communion, the briefest glance into connection that transcends words. Ego is the invisible wall that stands between connection and communion. It is the voice that says, I must be right. I must be seen. I must be in control. It disguises itself as strength, but it is born from fear. The ego seeks to define, to protect, to possess. But in doing so, it creates separation from others and from the self. In the act of love, whether physical or emotional, this separation becomes the greatest barrier. The ego cannot truly love, because love asks for dissolution and the ego fears to disappear. Yet, true intimacy begins only where the ego ends. When a man comes into union with a woman, his energy carries more than his desire. It carries his conditioning, his need to succeed, to perform, to dominate, to prove worth. These are not conscious choices. They are the reflexes of an ego that has learned to survive through control. But the deeper the intimacy, the less control matters. The deeper the connection, the more the ego begins to tremble because it senses that something greater than itself is approaching. True union demands surrender, and surrender is the ego's greatest fear. The ego resists surrender because it equates it with loss. It believes that to let go is to become weak, to give up power, to risk being hurt. But in reality, surrender is not weakness, it is trust. It is the willingness to allow life to move through you rather than against you. In intimacy, this means letting go of control and allowing energy to flow naturally without manipulation or defense. When the man stops trying to manage the moment, he begins to feel it. When he stops trying to prove himself, he begins to know himself. In that awareness, the walls of separation start to dissolve. To surrender the ego is to open the gate to truth. The ego lives in stories. Stories about what love should look like, what success should feel like, what masculinity or femininity should be. But the truth is wordless, formless, and immediate. It is felt, not described. It lives in presence, not in performance. When the man releases his attachment to these stories, he begins to see that love is not something he achieves, but something that happens through him when he becomes empty of self. The more he releases, the deeper he feels. The deeper he feels, the more he becomes one with what is before him. In the sacred meeting between masculine and feminine energies, surrender is not about submission. The masculine energy, in its awakened form, is pure presence, still aware, unshaken. The feminine energy, in her awakened form, is pure flow, open, intuitive, alive. When the ego dominates, the masculine tries to control and the feminine resists. When surrender arises, control transforms into guidance and resistance transforms into trust. The two energies merge and a higher intelligence takes over. Not the mind, but the essence of consciousness itself. The man who surrenders his ego begins to move differently. His touch loses its tension. His breath slows. His awareness deepens. He no longer sees his partner as something to possess or satisfy, but as a mirror of his own consciousness. In her eyes, he begins to see himself more clearly. Her reactions reflect his energy. Her openness mirrors his surrender. Her stillness invites his awareness deeper. The more he lets go of the need to control her experience, the more harmony arises between them. Ego thrives in comparison. It measures, it competes, it wants to win. It cannot exist without duality. But love is unity. It knows no hierarchy, no victory, no defeat. When the ego surrenders, the need to be better or right dissolves. There is only this moment, alive, breathing, unrepeatable. The man who once tried to prove his power discovers that real power is not force but stillness. Real power does not impose, it allows. In allowing, he finds depth. In depth, he finds connection. And in connection, he finds what his ego was seeking all along, a sense of completeness. The surrender of ego does not mean the disappearance of identity, but the softening of it. It means recognizing that identity is just a temporary mask worn by something infinite. When the mask drops, the infinite begins to speak. The act of intimacy becomes prayer, movement becomes meditation, breath becomes bridge. The separation between self and other fades. Two become one not because they have merged physically, but because they have dissolved energetically into the same field of awareness. Surrender requires courage, the courage to stand naked in truth without defense, without story. It means allowing vulnerability to exist without shame. The ego fears vulnerability because it cannot control it, yet vulnerability is the doorway to authenticity. When a man allows himself to be seen as he is, not as he wants to appear, he invites true connection. His openness gives the feminine permission to open as well. Her body, her energy, her breath respond not to dominance, but to depth. The deeper his surrender, the more she feels safe to surrender to. This is how union expands beyond the physical and becomes energetic harmony. To surrender is to trust the intelligence of life itself. It is to understand that intimacy is not something the mind can orchestrate. It happens through awareness, not through effort. When the ego is quiet, awareness can hear what the body feels, what the breath says, what the silence asks. The man no longer acts from fear or desire, but from alignment. He listens, not to his thoughts, but to the space between them. In that silence, the energy of connection begins to flow with its own rhythm. Every act of surrender is an act of returning to the essence before the ego began to divide, to define, to defend. When one surrenders, one rediscovers the innocence of being. In that innocence, there is no separation, no need to impress or to control. There is only awareness meeting awareness, presence meeting presence, life meeting life. The ego resists this because it fears disappearing. But what disappears is not the self, only the illusion of separation. What remains is vastness, peace, and truth. The surrender of the ego is the ultimate act of freedom. It frees love from possession, passion from pressure, and union from expectation. It allows energy to move in its natural flow, without distortion or demand. In that flow, both masculine and feminine energies find balance. What once was tension becomes harmony, what once was fear becomes openness, what once was effort becomes grace. And in that grace, both awaken to a state of connection so profound that no word, no thought can contain it. There exists within every true meeting between two souls an invisible transaction, a flow of energy that moves beyond the limits of touch or desire. It is not a trade, not a taking or a giving in the ordinary sense, but a sacred exchange, a mutual offering of essence. In this space, the body becomes only the surface of a deeper current. The man brings his consciousness, his presence, his stillness. The woman brings her openness, her receptivity, her flow. When both are aware, the meeting becomes alchemy. Two energies merge not to consume each other, but to awaken what sleeps within both. This sacred exchange is not created by the physical act itself. It is created by the quality of awareness brought into it. When one enters with mindfulness, with reverence, with clarity of intention, the experience becomes transformative. When one enters unconsciously, seeking only gratification, the energy remains shallow and soon fades. In the conscious union, every touch is symbolic, every breath a bridge, every gaze a doorway to something infinite. The sacred exchange occurs when both energies meet with the understanding that they are not here to take, but to remember. The man's energy in its highest form represents direction, present stability. The woman's energy in its highest form represents creation, intuition, surrender. When the two meet in awareness, a natural polarity awakens. He grounds her, she expands him. He offers stillness, she offers motion. He penetrates with consciousness, she receives with openness. And through this dance, a current of energy begins to flow, rising and circulating through both bodies like an electric river. In that current, the boundaries of self begin to blur. The individual identities dissolve, leaving only the vibration of shared being. The sacred exchange is not a one-way offering. It is circular. The masculine gives through presence, and the feminine amplifies that energy through her receptivity. She receives, transforms, and returns it multiplied. Not through effort, but through nature. Her openness magnifies his awareness. His awareness deepens her surrender. In that endless cycle, both are nourished. This is why true connection replenishes instead of draining. When the exchange is sacred, both energies leave the encounter expanded, not depleted. But when the meeting is unconscious, the flow reverses. The masculine enters to take, to extract pleasure, to affirm ego. The feminine receives not through openness but through compliance or confusion. The energy becomes uneven, forced. Instead of creation, there is consumption. Instead of awakening, there is exhaustion. The sacred becomes ordinary. The exchange loses its light because awareness is absent. Without awareness, even the most passionate act becomes hollow. With awareness, even the simplest touch becomes divine. To engage in a sacred exchange requires deep presence. It asks both to be completely there, not as roles, not as ideas, but as essence. The man must quiet the noise of the mind that seeks to perform or control. The woman must silence the voice of fear that resists vulnerability. Both must step into the moment stripped of masks, stripped of story. Only then does the energy begin to move freely. The breath synchronizes, the heartbeats align, and something ancient awakens, a remembrance of unity. It is not just man meeting woman, it is consciousness meeting life, awareness meeting creation. The sacred exchange is an act of balance. The masculine energy, when present, anchors the space. He does not take, he holds. He does not demand, he guides. His role is to maintain awareness so that energy can flow without chaos. The feminine, when open, allows that awareness to expand. She does not collapse into it, she blossoms within it. She becomes the movement within his stillness, the life within his silence. This harmony is what gives depth to connection. Without the grounding of awareness, her openness becomes scattered. Without her openness, his awareness becomes static. The sacred exchange exists only when both energies move in mutual respect. In the sacred exchange, pleasure is not the goal, presence is. The sensations are not the purpose, they are the reflection of energy flowing without obstruction. The deeper the awareness, the more subtle and profound the sensations become. Pleasure, in its truest form, is the body's recognition of harmony. When energy moves without friction, it feels like peace. When energy meets resistance, it feels like tension. The sacred exchange transforms pleasure into prayer, passion into meditation, and union into awakening. Through this exchange, both partners begin to heal. The feminine heals her fear of being unseen because she feels the depth of masculine presence fully holding her. The masculine heals his fear of vulnerability because he experiences surrender not as weakness but as power. Each becomes medicine for the other. In her openness, he rediscovers softness. In his stillness, she rediscovers safety. Together, they dissolve the ancient divide between doing and being, giving and receiving, control and flow. What remains is equilibrium, a silent, living balance between two forces that have always sought reunion. This exchange extends beyond the physical moment. When two energies meet in this depth of awareness, something subtle lingers long after the touch ends. The vibration remains within the body, the memory within the soul. Both carry pieces of each other's frequency, reshaping the way they move through life. The sacred exchange leaves traces not on the skin but in the spirit. It refines perception, heightens intuition, and deepens the capacity for love. It teaches that intimacy is not about ownership, but about exchange. Not about what one can get, but about what one can share. To engage in such exchange requires reverence, a quiet respect for the power of connection. The body is a temple, and the meeting of two bodies is a ceremony. Every breath becomes an offering, every touch an invocation. The masculine bows not to the form, but to the energy that moves through it. The feminine opens not to the body, but to the consciousness that meets her. The act becomes sacred not because of its passion, but because of its awareness. Awareness is what turns flesh into flame, motion into meditation, desire into devotion. The sacred exchange is the remembrance of life's fundamental rhythm. Inhale and exhale, give and receive, stillness and motion, masculine and feminine. Every element of existence moves through this same pattern. Intimacy only reflects what the universe has always done, energy circulating through polarity to create balance, creation, and renewal. When two people enter this rhythm consciously, they become part of that universal dance. They move not as two separate beings, but as currents of the same ocean, waves rising and falling in harmony with the breath of existence. To recognize this is to see intimacy not as an escape from the self, but as a return to it. In the sacred exchange, love is no longer an emotion. It is an energy, timeless and expansive, flowing through awareness itself. It moves without ownership, without end, without need to define. The sacred exchange reminds both that what they touch in one another is not merely body, but being, not merely pleasure, but presence, not merely desire, but divinity.